Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Let's dive into today's conversation regarding life's myriad transitions and how we refine our responses in our relationships, our wellness, our households, our work, and in our practices. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. Old friends alert. I'm so excited to welcome Colleen and Jason of mindbodygreen. Hello and welcome, you guys.
It's so nice to hear your voice.
I know. It brings us back to the golden era of wellness in New York.
You know what's funny? I was thinking about when we met, and I was dating at the time Dan Cook. I was in Los Angeles and Venice. Jonah was 2. He's now almost 17. And we were standing in the kitchen, and in the two of you walk this like stunning power couple, 8 feet tall. And I'm just like, who are these people? And I love these people. And I know these people. And we started our friendship officially there, I feel. And I think you'd taken my classes before, correct?
I think you made us carrot soup in a Vitamix at Dan Cook's house.
That's probably true.
My very first Vitamix experiences.
Yeah.
And
yeah. That happens.
I mean, your Saturday yoga class was such a staple of the 2010s and our New York experience.
I know. It's such a funny thing. Now I do the Glow class online at the same exact time at 11 Eastern to sort of maintain some kind of normalcy. And I love it still. It's the window of time every single week. But I'm so glad you guys are here. You have a beautiful, beautiful book called The Joy of Well-Being. And the subtitle is A Practical Guide to a Happy, Healthy, and Long Life. And you guys know a little bit about this. I'll speak about Colleen first. You're the co-founder and co-CEO here at mindbodygreen. This is now a phase of your life where you're living in Miami with your 2 girls, Ellie and Grace. How old are they now?
6 and 4.
Wow. You graduated from Stanford, badass. You've worked for 1 million Fortune 500 companies before you realized that actually, instead of dying, you're going to be well. And you're on Instagram at Colleen Wachob, and the spelling for our listener is COLLEENWACHOB. Jason, your fine husband, who I think I met first. Is that true?
I think so.
Yeah, I think we met first in class, but you're also the founder and co-CEO of mindbodygreen. It's worth it to note, our listener, in case you haven't been there, which I doubt, but just in case, mindbodygreen has 15 million monthly unique visitors. He's the host of the mindbodygreen podcast, of course. And you also wrote a book called Wealth. That was a bestseller. WELLTH. How I Learned to Build a Life, Not a Resume. Also, a really great resource. It's actually weird that we haven't talked about it. I should have it here. You've also been featured in lots of different incredible publications, and you have a BA from Columbia. You know, this is like a pretty incredible couple. I'm really happy that you're here. I'm so happy that we're still friends 20 years down the road. And this book is a beautiful guide. And it doesn't matter, our listener, if you know what wellness looks like, or you feel like you've kind of started hacking into yourself and figuring out how to keep yourself really vibrant. This book is a really cool, easy to follow, I haven't seen anything like it guide to what well-being looks like and what joy looks like. Joy being the operative word. I'm going to run through the chapters, and then I'd love for you guys to pick a chapter that you think is really important. I've read the whole book. I've got everything dog-eared and posted it and highlighted, so we'll have fun. For our listener, chapter 1 is what well-being looks like. Chapter 2, breathe. Chapter 3, sleep, a vital sign. I like that it's so early in the book. Chapter 4, eat real food. I'm pretty sure we have to talk about that. Chapter 5, just move it. Chapter 6 is stress. Chapter 7, regenerate, which I loved. Chapter 8, in it together. Chapter 9, something bigger. And then there's a conclusion, be water, my friend, and I look forward to just asking one or two questions there. Which chapters really lit you up, Colleen?
The breath chapter was an important one for us to start with because of my own story with breath. And I had a very kind of out of the blue pulmonary embolism when I was working at one of those many corporate jobs that you mentioned. And one of my deepest hopes with the book is that we can listen to the whispers of our body when something is off, either with our physical body or our nervous system, so that we don't have to wait for this cosmic kick in the butt from the universe to change our lives. And that's why we start the book with, how do you know when it's time to make a change to your life? And I hope people can listen to those subtle signs. And, the brief kind of personal story of what really led me to dive deep into wellness and well-being was when I had a pulmonary embolism at the age of 32. And at this moment in life, I was working at Amazon, doing all the things. I think if you had asked me what brought me a lot of joy in life, I'd say after work drinks and margaritas, and was really missing this connection to something bigger outside of myself. And I left a fitness class in New York City, and I called Jason, and I was like, I'm having some trouble breathing. Can you walk around the West Village with me? So he met me and we walked around the West Village, and then I was like, I think I just need to go home. And so we took the A train home, and this particular station had very steep steps. So I collapsed on the steps of the Brooklyn station and then eventually walked out, and we called my GP from the station outside. And I did what so many women do, and I gaslit my own symptoms. And I was like, oh, I'm dehydrated. I worked too hard. I'm totally fine. And so I spent the rest of the weekend completely out of character, being lethargic, taking naps. And then come Monday morning, Jason said, the only way you can go to work is if you stop by your doctor's office on the way. I'm really worried about you. So within a couple of minutes of arriving at my GP in Soho, not far from Vera Yoga, actually, he was like, you're having a pulmonary embolism.
Who was your GP at the time?
Stuart Lewis.
Of course. Nice.
And I was so confused that he gave me a little sign that he made that said, I'm having a pulmonary embolism. I wasn't sure if he didn't think I wouldn't be able to communicate once I got to NYU, or if he was concerned that I wouldn't make it to NYU and people would be like, what is going on with the woman in the back of this yellow cab? Because this was, kind of pre-Uber in New York when I did take a taxi cab to NYU. And when I got to NYU, I had showers of clots in my lungs and was truly lucky to be alive. And
how did he know that you had a pulmonary embolism? I'm just curious.
First, when you say that you're on a birth control pill, and then he, was looking at my heart and my breathing and could tell that I was not breathing properly.
And your calf was swollen.
Yeah. And, it's
thrombosis.
The dots kind of after the fact. It's like, oh, it's so obvious. But, at the time, you're like, oh, I must have pulled my leg, and that's why it's swollen. So this started what was a very long healing journey. And having a pulmonary embolism is very much an invisible illness, in that I looked what people would define as healthy on the outside, but really struggled to breathe. And I remember in the heat of New York summer, being worried about getting a seat on the train and, not wanting to make eye contact with older adults because I'd be, walking very quickly to try to get that last subway seat. And this was the huge cosmic kick in the butt that caused me to identify and challenge every element of how I'd been living my life. And it was the first time that I had paid attention to my breath. And more than half of the population is breathing all wrong through their mouths, which is not the right way to breathe. Humans breathe between 17,000 and 30,000 times a day. There are so many dysfunctional breathing habits that people have that I had never really given much thought to. But if you suffer from anxiety, allergy, sleep apnea, and if you snore, there's a chance that you're not breathing correctly. So this was the first time that I became in tune with the idea of breathing through your nose. And there's, a ton of health benefits from filtering out bad stuff, increasing CO2 tolerance. But I'm also someone who runs really high on anxiety. So being able to activate this sense of calm and the rest and digest system of the parasympathetic nervous system is just a wonderful life skill and life tool to have. So, to kind of go back to your original question, why we started with breath is because when you're looking at ways to make an impact in your life, it's literally something you're doing up to about 30,000 times a day. It's free, it's easily applicable and implemented into your life. And it's such a wonderful place to start.
It is such a wonderful place to start. I'm on page 41 of the Breathe chapter. When you understand how your nervous system works and the positive impact your breath has on that system, you can change the way you react to stress. We talked about how breathing influences the fight or flight mechanism, otherwise known as the sympathetic branch of our nervous system. But respiration also influences the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, known as the rest and digest branch. Fast breathing through your mouth can act as a trigger for the sympathetic nervous system, heightening or even causing anxiety. Alyssa Appel, PhD, psychologist and professor at University of California, San Francisco, says, quote, "The rate and depth at which we breathe is a huge determinant of our mental state." So I was sitting last night. I teach meditation at a women's shelter, a family shelter here in Santa Fe on Mondays. And I was teaching to inhale and sort of gather slowly all of your attention from the day, from the sounds in the kitchen next door and the adjacent room, and then exhale, let that attention sort of settle in your bodies, an instruction that I get from my teacher all the time. And one of the gals in the room last night said, when they teach me how to breathe to prevent an epileptic seizure, she tells me, they taught me to breathe really fast through my mouth. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure if whoever taught her is completely uneducated or if she perhaps misinterpreted. I said, but how do you feel now after those long breaths, gathering your attention and then letting it settle? And she said, I haven't felt this calm in many years.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's totally true. I can't believe that just happened last night, where that was such a marked part of my experience there last night, but that just happened. And on page 43 in the book, you talk about how breathing properly supports hormonal balance. You mentioned researcher Tanya Bentley, PhD, who co-founded the Health and Human Performance Foundation with Brian McKenzie, and her story. And that's a really cool reference point for women to grab this book and read this section 43 into 45 or so, and learning how proper breathing can have a noticeable impact on stress reduction. And I'm just so grateful that you talked about it so thoroughly here and you really gave it the space that it merits.
Breath is just so underutilized, under-researched, and, we love Tanya's story because we think it speaks to the potential of what's possible. And if you think about the major objections that people have to health and well-being, it's, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, and I'm not sure if it's going to work. And if we're all breathing all day, this is such a tremendous place to start. And I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of the health benefits. And so we just love Tanya and Brian's foundation and the work they're doing because we think it's definitely worthy of more resources to really see the true potential of breathing properly.
Thank you for that. Page 48 and 49 for our listener, you have a couple of practices there. Start by finding chunks of time when it's easy to breathe through your nose. Wow. Okay, it's doing dishes, checking email, making breakfast, driving. Make a conscious effort to practice breathing through your nose during that time. And if you're wondering why the nose and you are sort of a geek and you want to understand more about that, there's a book called Breath by James Nestor, Nestor, that explains how our evolutionary biology explains how we have become mouth breathers rather than nose breathers, and how detrimental that is to our alkaline acid balance, to our hormone health, to our heart health, so many things. So really think about breathing through your nose. There's also the 4-7-8 breath on page 49, the relaxing breath, as it was dubbed. It's an Andrew Weil technique. Good one to pull out, as you write, when you're feeling extra keyed up. Will help you slow your heart rate. So inhale for 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. There are a couple more on page 52. Jason, what are some of the chapters that you've found particularly exciting to write and now to talk about?
This one was definitely interesting for me because I am definitely a lab testing guy who believes that nutrition and exercise are paramount and you need those fundamentals in place. But while researching the book, I found the connection chapter to be fascinating and also some good lessons for me personally. And I think in terms of the State of the Union and how we're doing with the mental health epidemic and the loneliness epidemic, I think this is one that needs some attention and I think is often overlooked in our world. You know, if you look at the statistics, 1 in 7 men don't have a single friend. 1 in 10 women don't have a single friend. I think it's 24% of young adults under the age of 30 suffer from loneliness. And you're like, okay, I get it, but why does it matter for a book about longevity? Well, if you look at the studies in terms of increasing your odds of premature mortality, lacking connections slightly worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it's twice as worse as having 6 drinks a day. That's 42 drinks a week. 3 times as worse as being physically inactive and twice as worse as being obese. So if you think about the health implications of loneliness, they're dire. And this is one for me. I'm not lonely per se. I've got an incredible family and I've got incredible friends. But like many men who start to get up there in age, I'm 48 now, I lost touch with a lot of great friends I had from high school and college and my early career just because of life. You know, work, family, kids, COVID. And it's something that I've needed to work on. And I think I'm not alone. And men are notoriously far worse than our female counterparts about keeping in touch. And so I think with emotional well-being, when you start to think about connection, the questions are a lot more difficult for people. I think people tend to know, okay, I could eat better or I need to move more. But, well, why is it if it's 11 p.m. and I'm in dire need of someone to call and I've got no one to call? Why is that? I think the questions require work that a little bit more difficult than eating more broccoli or practicing some yoga. And so this was an important one. And I think it brings back, you know, it's the core theme of the book. You know, there's so much wellness out there. There's so many practices and modalities that we can do and protocols and so on. But if we're miserable, if we don't have meaningful IRL connection, I think there was a number out of Cigna in 2019 that said half of all people lacked meaningful IRL connection on a daily basis. That was 2019. Imagine what that number is today. So if we don't have all this, we don't have real connections that bring us joy, what's the point of being fit and mobile and healthy? And, you know, I've optimized my VO2 max and all those fantastic longevity markers. Who cares if you really don't have loving relationships? And it's just paramount.
You know, it's funny, James, when I first met him, we're now together almost 10 years, and he was complaining that he didn't feel connected to other guys. He felt very sort of confronted. Of course, he has a story of abuse in his childhood at the hands of his father. He's got all kinds of, you know, real trauma there in the realm of masculinity. And he has spent the last 10 years not only being part of a men's group, but starting to create conscious male friendships for himself. And it's so beautiful to watch. And for our listener, I think we're in chapter 8. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a really nice story to read about the Rosetto study.
Oh, I love it.
So nice. Would you mind just summarizing it for our
Sure.
listeners so that they know what they're coming into?
This is like my all-time favorite study now. So Roseto was this small town in rural Pennsylvania in the 1950s. And then this is when heart disease arrives in America, except in Roseto. The rate of heart attacks for those over 65 was half that of the nation. Men under 55, no heart disease, no heart attacks. So they take a look, like, what are these people doing? Are they doing NAD injections? Are they, taking collagen? Are they doing CrossFit? And of course, they're not doing any of these things. They're drinking, they're smoking, they're eating lots of pasta and meatballs and all the things that,
It's the 60s.
Exactly. What we shouldn't do. This makes no sense. When they take a deeper look, they discovered that this community had strong social connections. Multi-generational living was very common. There were lots of parties, parades. This was all done in the context of, celebrating with family and friends, all the wine and good food and so on. And then in the 1960s, the community starts to break up. People start to move away. And guess what? Heart disease catches up with the national average. And this just really hit home for me. We can do all of the quote unquote things, but the importance of meaningful IRL connection is just paramount.
I love the fact that the town is called Roseto, but I'm pretty sure all Italian Americans, it should really be like Rosetto or something like that. This is not how we say it. In any case, I love that we've touched on chapter 1 and, of course, chapter 8. I want to talk a little bit about the real food, chapter 4. Starting on page 79 for our listener, if you're with us. We go through a whole number of really incredible, brief, edifying sections in this particular chapter on everything from sugar to refined oils. And refined oils is something that I really should have known about sooner, but I'm just really learning now how bad these refined seed oils are for us. I watched a video on YouTube that showed me how many times these poor little seeds are heated and cooled and heated and cooled, and how dirty the process is. And then we use that as fat. I learned about Crisco and how in the 50s, the byproduct of some sort of industrial process was then used by Procter & Gamble to create Crisco and sold to women through Julia Child and other cooks and cookbooks as this miracle fat, when in fact, butter is so much better for us. Butter was then villainized, and we were all taught as a whole population, as a whole country, that butter is the cause of all the heart disease and cholesterol, when really it was actually smoking and this lack of connection, lack of movement, and so many other factors. And I thought it might be nice to talk about that and just make sure that our listener is well advised on the difference between something like margarine, which is fake, canola oil, fake, and butter or ghee as a healthy, whole, nourishing fat for our bodies.
Yeah, this was a chapter, of all the chapters, I think we spent the most time on this one, considering how it's full of emotion, ideology, and landmines, and lots of conflicting science. And I think ultimately our view is one that's balanced. And the why behind this chapter was also a bit of a why behind the book, in that extremes in philosophy are what algorithms favor on the internet. And, one of the studies we reference in the chapter is a study out of Wharton that looked at articles from the New York Times that went viral, essentially the most emailed list, the New York Times. And they sought to see if there were any commonalities with emotion. And there sure were. Anxiety on anger. And the top emotion, the greatest chances of increasing virality, was anger. Anger increased virality by 34%. So in other words, someone reads an article in the New York Times, gets angry, and that article was more likely to be read, shared, or watched or listened to if it was a pod or video. We don't think the New York Times is unique here. We think this is social media. And we think that this is driving the conversation on nutrition on social media. If you think about it, what shows up in your feed? It's carnivore, it's vegan, it's not a lot of, eat whole foods, maybe have an occasional glass of wine and, enjoy it with friends. It doesn't really play well for the algorithm. And essentially our philosophy, where we do think the science is quite strong, is eat real food. And there are a number of studies that talk about the dire consequences of eating ultra-processed food. One that we highlight in the book came out of France that showed that a 10% increase in consumption of highly processed food led to a 14% increased risk of mortality. And then you think about the US, how are we doing here? Well, it's like 2/3 of the calories consumed by kids come from highly processed foods. And look, processed foods happen. They happen in our life, they happen in everyone's life. But I think the memo here is be mindful of processed foods, be mindful of the oils, try to eat whole foods. And we do emphasize bio-individuality. And to prove this point, because there's lots of discussion and debate around the extremes of, carnivore or vegan or what have you. And we reference two of our friends. One is Mark Sisson. He's our friend in Miami. He's 69. He eats pretty close to a carnivore diet. He's extraordinarily fit. He looks great. He feels great. His labs are great. He exercises a lot, probably a little too much. And then on the other hand, we've got Rich Roll, our other friend who's 56, who's 100% plant-based. He probably exercises too much too. These men really don't have a lot in common in terms of diet, other than they don't eat a lot of processed foods. And we encourage people to do some basic lab work and really stick to the basics, eat real food. And that's the foundation of a balanced diet and go from there. But to your point, we couldn't agree more. Staying away from ultra-processed food is probably the way to go.
Yeah. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to highlight for our listener the mention on page 107 about the Michael Pollan quote, eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Yep.
As my sister-in-law, I call her my sister-in-law, but she's really not my sister-in-law, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, talks about a lot.
Love her.
You know that, right?
Yes.
We're so close. She's the second ex-wife of my son's dad.
Love it.
Love it. She's
small world. She's
incredible.
We love her. We love her, and her view is so scientifically driven and
yes. Yes. So I love thinking about her because she has me eating more meat than I would otherwise, feeling so much better. I love Rich Roll, and I particularly love his wife, who makes the most incredible vegan cheese. And if you need to treat yourself, people, just go to Shri, S-R-I, M-U-D-O, Life, Shrimudo Life, shrimudolife.com, S-R-I-M-U-D-O-L-I-F-E. Unbelievable vegan cheese. But I stand in the middle of the two of them. And I like this sort of paradigm because in the book on this page, you also talk about sticking to the perimeter of the grocery store, which is where Dr. G and Rich Roll, and Julie are for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're in the perimeter of the grocery store. Don't fucking go in the middle of the grocery store and think you're going to get anything that's nourishing to you. It's in a box. It went through 4,000 processes to get into the shape that it's in, even if it's a cracker. No more crackers. Buy a cucumber, slice it up, dip it in your cheese or whatever, your hummus, whatever you're doing. Oh my God, I've learned so much in the last few years about this, and the mention of the perimeter of the grocery store just really hits home for me.
Yeah, we agree. And Colleen and I have joked it would be a lot easier for us to be vegan if we lived in a house with Julie, because she is the best cook.
Agreed. No,
Amazing.
agreed. Totally agreed. I can't wait to meet that person. She's just a hero of mine. I just keep ordering cheese, vegan cheese. That's all I do. I just keep it in the house. One more chapter I'd love to get into, which is the conclusion. And of course, there are so many endnotes. You guys have really done your homework here. I really laud the amount of effort and science and care that you took with this book. But here's the beginning of the conclusion. Be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you will find a way around or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose themselves. Be water, my friend. That's a quote from Bruce Lee. I'm going to read it a second time because, really good haiku, they should be read twice. Be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose themselves. Be water, my friend. Talk to me, talk to us, you guys, about how this became the end of this book. It's just so beautiful and perfect, and it really touched me. And I thought, oh, at the end of this wonderful, very practical and edifying guide, we get to this super sort of zen, real pensive moment. And it's helped me, this quote, I've never seen it before, reading it in your book, and it helped me get through a really weird, troubling moment recently where something could have really caused me to be very rigid, this particular circumstance. And instead, I just really softened myself, and things were able to pass through really fast and swiftly. I would love to hear why you guys chose this in closing.
Yeah, we love Bruce's words, and overall, it's part of this desire to show an openness to new science, to new feelings, to the changes that happen throughout the seasons of life. And there was an intentionality behind not calling this book The Joy of Wellness, but shifting the conversation to be one of well-being. We have such a complicated relationship with the word wellness as it plays out right now in the world. There's just a cacophony of voices, often angry, on social media. And, when we step back, we're like, actually, we can mostly agree on a lot of stuff that's been time tested, that isn't too time intensive, that isn't too cost intensive, but that's not getting the airtime in a lot of media. So when we think of the word wellness, we think of rigidity, inflexibility in some ways. We think of a lot of protocols, and we want to shift the conversation to be one of well-being, which to us represents more abundance, more flexibility, and more openness to change.
And I think for us, it's almost bigger than health and well-being or longevity. Coming to conversations with curiosity, compassion, and empathy, I think those are life lessons that transcend any category, if you will. And I think the world needs more of that. But unfortunately, whether it's nutrition or Pilates or what have you, it's become ideology. And when someone's beliefs are challenged, they become reactive and angry and really don't come to a conversation with curiosity, compassion, and empathy. And I think we'd all agree the world would be a better place. As human beings, we have the ability to receive stimulus, and there's a space in between response. I think we'd all agree the world would probably benefit from us being able to create more distance between the stimulus and response. And we're not quite good at that.
Right. You close in this chapter a really beautiful paragraph that I wanted to read to our listener as well on page 236. Not quite the closing paragraph, but really awesome. The last sort of thought. We have given you 9 chapters of ideas, practices, and ways of being that in any number of configurations can help you live your good life. There is no one right way. You are water. Adjust as necessary. Be flexible about your routine, your practices, your relationships. Remember that consistency beats perfectionism every day of the week and twice on Sundays. Don't let wellness frustrate you. It should be a sanctuary. It should bring you joy. It should pull you away from your phone. Do what feels good and makes you happy, and understand that living the good life is the ultimate alchemy. Like, guys, so good. I didn't even read the whole thing. Like, it's so good. Our listener, this is a really good book to have around when you're feeling blue, when you're feeling low, when you're feeling like everything is just intractable. You open this book, and anywhere you look, you're going to learn something. You're going to be inspired to take better care of yourself in a very practical fashion. And you're actually going to walk away feeling this sense of this alchemy, this living of a good life, making of one small choice for your own well-being is actually the ultimate alchemy. And I really appreciate that you guys wrote this book. I wasn't expecting it to be this way. Really.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Elena. I don't know if we get a vote, but we vote for an Elena Brower large-scale yoga class in Miami.
Oh, bless. You know what? That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Do you know where it should be?
Oh, we can find you a place.
Yeah.
We'll make
great. Just find it. Just find it. I'll organize it. I've cleaned my calendar to a great extent. I'm just writing a book and sort of taking care of a few private clients and teaching on Glow, but I would love to do a nice visit to Miami. That's an easy trip for me.
Well, this idea of community is such an important part of the book. And I just want to thank you because, in the book we go through our fertility struggle, which was long, arduous.
Yes, it was. I saw that.
Very deeply painful. And there were some days that I would just show up to your 11 o'clock class in tears, not really able to talk about it. And I remember one of the last ones at ABC, and I was just inconsolable. And you just had this way of making everyone, no matter what they were going through, feel heard and give empathy. And I want to thank you for being such an important part of our lives during that struggle.
Ooh. I have my hand on my heart. I'm just a little teary
Same.
At the moment. Here's to Ellie and Grace, to whom you've dedicated the book. What a blessing. You wrote to Ellie and Grace, we hope that your journey is filled with lots of joy and well-being. We love you more than anything. Oh, I'm just so glad that they exist and that you guys you got to have that experience that you so wanted. What a blessing. What a blessing. So let's organize something in Miami. I'm super down. I'll call. I'm definitely down. And anything you want, I'm keen.
Amazing. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. We'll make it happen. You put it into the universe and we'll make sure the synchronicity aligns.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you both so much for being here. And thank you to our listener for listening. And a note, which I've been doing lately on my episodes. I have my copy that's been marked up and dog-eared and highlighted of The Joy of Well-Being. Our listener, if you choose to leave a comment on the podcast, on this episode, anywhere, email me your comment, info@alenabrower.com. I only read my emails. There's nobody else reading my emails. And I'm going to put your name in a hat to receive this copy, my copy, via snail mail from my house to you, to thank you for leaving a comment. And I love doing that because I collect lots of books, and once I've read them thoroughly and interviewed the authors, it's time to pass them on to somebody who will really need it and enjoy it. Thank you so much, guys, again.
Thank you so much, Elena. Such a pleasure to hear your voice, and we look forward to seeing you IRL in Miami.
Yes, please. Awesome. Thank you both.